I love Spurgeon, and I recently ran across one of his talks that he gave to his students for pastoral ministry, and it had to do with criticism in the church, like you receiving criticism from people or gossip or whatever. It kind of all flows together. And frankly, I was convicted by it. Not that I deal with tons of criticism in my church, but nonetheless, from time to time, if you're in ministry, there is criticism around you. So what do you do? Maybe you're struggling with criticism right now. I will link this entire teaching from Spurgeon down in the description below. It's called The Blind Eye and the Deaf Ear. And he gives way more advice on how to deal with criticism in the church than what I'm going to cover in this video. So if you like what you hear in this video from Spurgeon and you want to hear even more, check out the whole thing. I'll link it down in the description below. Perhaps the simplest advice that he gave when it came to criticism in the church was simply this: don't listen for it. We're going to talk about not listening to it, in a sense, here in a second, but first, don't listen for it, he said. He used this old proverb that I thought was great. The listener seldom hears good about himself, meaning, if we're being honest, when people talk behind our backs and it's not intended for our ears, and I'm not even saying behind our backs in necessarily a negative way, but when people talk about us when we aren't in the room, it's not always the nicest thing to hear. Most of the time, if you are listening to a quote-unquote secret conversation, you aren't going to like what you have to hear. So I've got to ask you, as somebody who's dealing with criticism in the church, if that's you, are you listening for it? Are your ears like, maybe you've got a little taste of it and you're like, I think this person's, talking behind my back, and now it's like, you're like metaphorically sneaking around the corner and you're like, they're talking to somebody in the church lobby and you're like looking around and you're like, well, what are they saying? What are they saying? Are they talking about me? Spurgeon says, stop doing that. You're not going to like what you hear. And he even goes on to talk about how give them grace, because imagine what you say about people in private, right? Like, ouch. Like, what do I say about people in private sometimes? Like, would I want everybody that I talk about in private, and I'm not even saying that I think that this is a particularly large problem for me, but it's probably a problem for all of us. Imagine how you talk about people in private. What if those people heard everything that you have ever said about them? So, if you do that, give other people grace. Because if you were in the room, it might not even be necessarily that they're like seeking to undermine you in some way. It's just that if they knew you were in the room, they would present it in a different way. And they might even be saying the same thing, but because you heard it and they didn't know that you were hearing it, they said it in a harsher way. And maybe it was still true, whatever they said, or maybe it wasn't true. But either way, don't just go around listening for criticism in your church. This is a trap that we fall into. Let it be out of your mind. How do we get it out of our mind? Well, I think Spurgeon goes on to give us some more advice where we will not even want to listen for criticism anymore. And his second piece of advice is this. Essentially, don't take to heart criticism or praise. That's right. The two extremes. Either you will be criticized or you will be praised. Spurgeon says, don't take to heart either of those. Don't allow either praise to inflate your ego or criticism to destroy your ego. He puts it this way: have you not by this time discovered that flattery is just as injurious as it is pleasant? Why? Because it softens the mind and makes you more sensitive to slander. In proportion praise pleases you, censure, meaning express severe disapproval, will pain you. In other words, when you let praise build you up so much and you're like, man, I just really hope that people are excited with what I'm doing. And I love when they're like, Spencer, you sounded so good on Sunday. And I'm like, yeah, I did. Oh, thank you. I guess I kind of did this Sunday. Like, I must be doing a really good job. Or, Spencer, you are so articulate in the way that you use speaking transitions between songs. It's like giving myself a pat on the back. The more you let praise build you up in that way, not that praise is a bad thing, but don't let it go to your head, I think is what Spurgeon is saying. The more you let it go to your head, the more dangerous it will be when you receive criticism. Why? Because you are coupling your self-worth with people's perception of you, whether that is a good perception or a bad perception. So the solution is, don't base your self-worth and how well you are doing with how well people like you. What do we do instead? We make sure that we are being obedient to the Word of God, and we are looking to please God rather than man. And a lot of times we use that phrase in terms of, well, this person's not going to like it, so I'm going to please God instead of them. But it cuts the other way. Even if I'm seeking to please man and I succeed in it, I can do that without pleasing God. So my litmus test for whether I'm successful is not whether I'm keeping everybody happy, not just in a negative sense where, okay, some people are mad, or it could be in the other sense where everybody's happy. That doesn't mean that you've succeeded. The litmus test for success is, am I being faithful to the Word of God and pleasing God in everything that I do? So don't listen to criticism or praise and give them all of this power in your life. Because just as quickly as you will be built up through praise, you will be torn down through criticism. So remove both from your mind. Consider praise a happy blessing to you, but do not allow it to inflate your ego, where your ego is controlled by praise or criticism. The third thing Spurgeon pointed out was that paranoia begets more paranoia. When it comes to criticism, once we receive a little bit, and this kind of goes back to the first point where I said don't even listen for criticism, because a little bit of paranoia about, oh no, people are talking behind my back, begets more paranoia. Spurgeon puts it this way. He says, some are childishly anxious to know their friend's opinion of them, and if it contain the smallest element of dissent or censure, they regard him as an enemy forthwith. Surely we are not popes and do not wish our hearers to regard us as infallible. So this is how he starts his discussion of this, is like, okay, and obviously all these points flow together because they're all from the same teaching. But it's like, okay, I'm going to start listening to what my friends think about me. And it's like, okay, well, I'm hoping that my friends, the people I consider my friends, praise me. But wait, they praised me like 90%, but 10% of it was criticism. And now I only focus on the criticism. And what does he say? He says, then you regard them as an enemy. So in a sense, you take the 10% and allow it to beget more and more animosity toward your friends. And what is his remedy for that? He says, surely you don't consider yourself a pope as infallible in what you do. So maybe your friend does have some valid criticism of you. And then I love, and I can't share it all in this video, but Spurgeon goes on, moving from that idea to talk about the pastor. Imagine this picture. He says, essentially the pastor turns into a spider, and the pastor plants himself in the center of his web. And the web are all of these feelers sent out to get the temperature of the people in our church. And the pastor sits in the middle of the web as the spider in his church. And as soon as there is just the smallest movement on the web, that web translates the movement to the spider pastor. And he receives that criticism. And as it happens more and more, he starts to feel more and more weighed down by it. And he becomes so sensitive to the effects of even the smallest touching of the web of criticism that it feels like this shock of a devastating blow to him, even the smallest amount. And I'm like, how many pastors have felt that? And I think in a sense that picture is just a picture of, frankly, what happens to a lot of pastors in the church. Not even that it is 100% unfounded by them. This is why pastors burn out sometimes, is because they feel like that spider in the web who feels, and Spurgeon uses that example because that's what spiders do, right? They sit in their web, they wait for their prey to come, and like at the smallest touch on the web. The spider's like, a fly is on the web, I've got to go out and get it. And like pastors become that. They start to spin more and more webs, putting out more and more feelers into the church, and even the smallest bit of criticism affects us on a deep level. And I'm not even saying that that's unfounded. I'm just saying that it's unhealthy to do that. So if you are the pastor, worship leader, whatever it is, volunteer, worship ministry leader, and you have spun a web in your church where you have put out feelers seeking to feel the criticism of every little piece of criticism that comes your way, seeking to feel the impact of that, tear down your web. Get off your spider web. Remove the web, stop listening for criticism, stop listening to criticism and praise, because paranoia only begets more paranoia. Now, so far, Spurgeon has been like, basically, don't listen to criticism or praise. Don't let it affect you, at least. But Spurgeon's ultimate point in this teaching was not that we just don't listen to criticism and we just throw it off in a corner and say, this doesn't apply to me, this person's stupid, and I'm not going to listen to them. Spurgeon essentially says to find the blessing in the criticism. Not in all criticism, but in a lot of criticism, there is an element of truth. And it's hard to mine the truth out of the criticism because our emotions get involved. But you've got to read this teaching from Spurgeon, because Spurgeon gives a lot of examples of how people would pick apart his preaching style. And he keeps saying in this teaching, he's like, I could be mad about it, or I could just seek to serve them better. I could seek to become a better preacher. I want to be so good of a preacher that people will have no reason to complain. They're going to complain anyways. But at the end of the day, I just want to allow that to drive me to become even better. Not that I get bitter towards the person, but that I become better at what I do. So as the saying goes, eat the meat and spit out the bones. Spurgeon puts it this way: a sensible friend who will unsparingly criticize you from week to week will be a far greater blessing to you than 1,000 undiscriminating admirers, if you have sense to bear his treatment and grace enough to be thankful for it. He says that one criticizer will help you far greater, and it's a friendly criticism, right? A sensible friend who will unsparingly criticize you. Somebody who comes up and says, you know what, Spencer, you did this wrong this week, and this is how you can improve. That is going to be 1,000 times better than 1,000 indiscriminating admirers. These are people who just come up to you and say every single week, Spencer, thank you so much. You sound so good. You did so great. Like, that doesn't provide feedback for you. So if you have sense to bear your sensible friend's treatment who unsparingly criticizes you, even if they aren't doing it with the right heart, if we seek the blessing of that, to see it as a way to improve, it will be a blessing to us to help us improve in what we do. And I've got to just share one more example of this is like a comment card that he got. It made me laugh. And it is an example of this happening. Remember, criticism can be good if we can get the truth out of it and actually accurately reflect on what we're doing. So this is the comment card that Spurgeon got. He's talking about some guy in his church who always signed something anonymously, so he didn't even know where it came from. It was this anonymous comment card. And he says, he remarked on one occasion that I too often quoted the line, "Nothing in my hands I bring." And he added, "We are sufficiently informed of the vacuity of your hands." That made me laugh out loud when I heard that, because it's like, I just imagine Spurgeon like every single Sunday for like 2 months in a row is like, "Listen, church, nothing in my hands I bring." And the guy was like, he said that the past 8 weeks in a row. "We are sufficiently informed of the vacuity of your hands." I love how people talk back then. That was crazy. The vacuity of your hands. We know that you bring nothing in your hands. And maybe, that was the criticism that Spurgeon used to be like, okay, you know what? What I was saying was not wrong. And people need to know that we don't bring anything to our relationship to God. He's obviously quoting Rock of Ages. Nothing in my hands I bring, simply to the cross I cling. Those are words that need to be heard every Sunday in some form. But perhaps the criticism and the reflection that Spurgeon would have taken from that was, okay, I need to find a different way to say it. I can say that same principle, but I don't have to quote Rock of Ages over and over again because people are sufficiently informed of the vacuity of my hands. And so that's how you harvest the gold out of a criticism, where if you or I received a comment card like that and it would be something slightly different, we would be like, I can't believe they said that. Like, how dare they not like my worship leading or what I say between songs, right? No, mine the gold out of the criticism. Now, knowing how to deal with criticism in our worship ministry is great, but we also have to be prepared for Sunday. So if you want help preparing for Sunday, check out 5 Tips to Instantly Improve Your Worship Leading. It's a free audio training I put together. In that, I will give you 5 super simple things that you can do before this Sunday to lead an engaging time of worship with confidence. This Sunday, they aren't hard to do. You just have to make the conscious effort to do them. So check out that free training down in the description below. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, stop listening to criticism.